Welcome back to CX Unplugged, everyone, brought to you by SAP Customer Experience. First episode for 2022. I'm your host, Costa Trianofilu, ecstatic and honored to be joined alongside Riad Hijal, Head of Product Marketing for SAP Customer Experience Commerce, and Angela Troccoli, Senior Product Marketing Director for Mirakl. How are you both doing today?
Great. Thank you for having us, Costa.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it. Angela Costa, thanks again for having me.
Likewise, we've got a very important topic to talk about today, resilient commerce. One of the main things that we like to do on CX Unplugged is drive as much engagement as we can with the audience. We are here for you folks. So before we start diving into the actual conversation, I want to ask you, the guests in the audience, when you hear the word resilient, what other word comes up to your mind? Synonyms: powerful, withstanding, strength. There's a lot of words that might float around. Quickly, if I pass it just to you, Riad and Angela, any synonyms that you might think of right off the bat?
Yeah, maybe I can take a stab at it. Sorry. So, I mean, to me, not as much a synonym as a notion, right? So the notion of being able to recover quickly from whatever gets thrown at you. And obviously, that requires a certain level of adaptation, and that's what comes to my mind, at least when I think about resilience. We talk a lot about people being resilient, but I think more and more the concept of organizations and enterprises and brands being resilient is becoming a key agenda, of boards and the C-suite, especially as we come out of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Angela, your quick 15-second view on what we mean by resiliency.
My mind always goes to agility, flexibility. I think you can't be resilient unless you already have a culture that is very agile and a supply chain and a commerce strategy that is flexible. So to me, I think all of those really go hand in hand.
Fantastic. Adaptability, being agile, two fantastic synonyms. Let's dig right into it. Riad, we realize that B2B organizations face huge challenges in this current world, right? We have a lot of brands that are moving to try and sell direct to consumer. We have changing conditions going around the world, issues with supply chains. But ultimately, when brands need to become resilient in a B2B context, what do we really mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, what it means is for B2B organizations is to put in place the organizational discipline, the culture, the mindset, and of course, the tool and technologies that allow them to adapt, ideally in a very agile manner, to what the world ultimately throws at them, right? So, if all of a sudden there's a natural disaster in, part of the world where you source, some of your products or goods and services, how can you quickly and frictionlessly activate other sources of supply, for example, or inventory, right? So that's one example. If a global pandemic hits, and all of a sudden restaurants and cafeterias and office buildings shut down overnight, how can you, as a wholesale food distributor, pivot to open new direct-to-consumer channels and business models, and be able to leverage those in a way that all your inventory, doesn't perish and your business doesn't go, belly up. So I think these are examples of what being resilient ultimately means. But underpinning all of it, I think, as Angela was saying, is first and foremost the appreciation that things can go sideways in an unpredictable way at any given moment in time, and what are the sets of tools and processes that as a business you've set up to be able to deal with those unknowns when they ultimately happen.
Yeah.
Lots of what's, lots of things that we need to really think about and consider when we're setting this up. And it's not to be a surprise to anyone. I mean, B2B organizations are complex. The world is complex. The way people do business now has changed drastically. A fantastic definition of the what, but on the converse side of that, there has to be a how as well, Angela. So how do we take everything that Riad just fantastically explained and actually put it into motion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the examples that Riad shared is having these additional sources of supply and really moving up and down your value chain so that it's not all sitting with you in your warehouse. And what we're seeing is that organizations are starting to adapt third-party marketplace models in order to do that, because they're able to bring on third-party sellers to support the fulfillment of goods or even services that their customers want without having to take on the cost or risk of more inventory. And if, for example, they have a supplier in Germany who is no longer able to supply XYZ product, they can very quickly pivot to a supplier in France or a supplier in Canada and still get the product to their customers in a really seamless and as Riad pointed out, a very frictionless way. So, one of the big hows for us at Mirakl is really to say, hey, marketplace helps you be more agile. It helps you grow more profitably, and it really helps you scale.
So we're going back to the word agility. I've seen a common theme in this conversation: a lot of agility, a lot of adaptability. We've seen, I guess, the theoretical side of what we really need to do to get this to work. Let's dive into some real proof points to both you, Riad, and Angela. Do you have any case studies or examples that you could share of brands and organizations that have gotten this right? I'm going to start with you first, Angela.
Well, there's actually one customer example that immediately comes to mind, and it's Airbus Helicopters. So they are a large aerospace organization, for those who are not familiar, based out of Europe. And what they found is that they were sometimes struggling to get the products and services to repair helicopters to the customer sites as quickly as they wanted to. And they're a very customer-centric organization. So they wanted to figure out a way that they could ensure, no matter what supply chain disruptions happen to crop up, they always could facilitate a value chain that got the right products and services to the right customers at the right time. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that helicopter goes down where you don't expect it to. So they actually adopted a marketplace, and they were able to source both global and local parts, spare parts, so that no matter where they needed to get those parts, they were able to source from their broad seller network and get those helicopters back up in the air within just a few hours. So when I think about agility and resilience and just ensuring that no matter what, they were set up to support their customers in the best way possible, Airbus Helicopters immediately comes to mind for me.
Riad, it seems to be that there's a very always customer first approach in align with this word agility that Angela just described for us. Can you give us another example on your side as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, before I do, a couple of interesting points, right, that we've seen coming out of the pandemic, and going back to the this notion of frictionless commerce, to be able to effectively execute on a frictionless commerce strategy. What we're seeing our customers tell us is they're moving beyond thinking in terms of back office versus front office. I mean, the reality is what we've seen also is during the pandemic, when websites or online presences broke down, it was in most cases due to lack of products on the shelf or in stock and disrupted supply chains. And so what customers are telling us is that as they rethink the way they actually go to market, adopting a one office approach that spans the entire value chain, that connects the back office to the front office, so that the experiences that you're delivering online are intimately tied to what you're able to supply, the right data, the right inventory at the right time, is an absolutely key success factor. And so one customer that did this very, very well during the pandemic, and I wasn't, using, in your initial question, I wasn't using the example of the wholesale, food distributor by pure, by pure coincidence. It's because brakes. It was ultimately the case of brakes, right? And so they had all of this inventory. They used to sell, to restaurants, to office cafeterias, and overnight all of that shut down. And so, leveraging a commerce platform that can support any channel, any touch point, any business model, they were able to pivot in a matter of 7 days to include a direct-to-consumer channel. They would not have been able to do that if they needed to, redeploy a new commerce engine, connect it to the back end, get the data in, because they already had a platform that had all of the tie-ins to the back end. All of the data was available. They were able to activate fairly easily a direct-to-consumer channel and then keep their business afloat, not waste, the inventory, the food inventory that they had, and incidentally also help the community because there was so much load on grocers and everybody wanted to shop online, right? So that to me is a prime example of what resilience ultimately looks like. And it's all about being prepared for both the known unknowns as well as the unknown unknowns. And the famous words of, if my memory serves me well, Vice President Cherney or Dick Rumsfeld back in the days.
As a fantastic example. I'm quickly going to reach out here to the audience again, and then I want to poll a question here. There's been a lot of definitions here around B2B marketplaces and how to be resilient. But if you want to deal with a B2B organization, what are you looking for as a customer? I'd love to see what the audience would be interested in hearing there. I want to quickly dovetail into a very short question here that I'd like to ask both of you. We've looked at a lot of the positive things, what we really need to do to set these marketplaces up to be successful, be resilient, be profitable. What's one thing brands shouldn't do, though?
I don't mean to seem negative. There's a lot of things that I think people are doing, still learning. Let's not say doing wrong, but still learning. I think first and foremost, the biggest concern that gets raised to me regularly from B2B organizations, irrespective of industry, irrespective of where they land in the value chain, is channel conflict. And so if you're going to introduce a new channel, it is critical that you bring all of your partners to the table and treat them like equal stakeholders. So if you're a manufacturer and you want to go direct to customer, bring your partners to the table and talk to them about it. Bring them into the strategy and have it be collaborative, have it be win-win. It is possible. And I think the mistake that is made is that you think you have to work in a silo. You think you have to go it alone. And that is generally what we see be an unsuccessful strategy. Bringing more stakeholders to the table, ensuring that everyone's on the same page and that everyone feels like they're getting something out of it is a surefire way to have a really seamless omnichannel experience. So that's definitely my number one.
Equality is something that I think everybody in the world is striving for nowadays, just not just in business, but just in the general personal world, right? Riad, to you, something that brands should not consider or avoid when building a strategy?
Yeah, I think it's important to take a step back and think about resiliency at a strategic level, right? Not to get lost in technology du jour or buzzwords du jour, but rather focus on what are the things that ultimately are going to help your business thrive for generations to come. And so one example or more concrete example I like to give is, thinking about not just short-term top-line growth, but also identifying, the needs for profitable growth, right? So, what we're seeing a lot, both in the B2C and the B2B world for that matter, is that as organizations and spend or consumer and buyer spend shifting more and more to digital, a lot of that spend is carrying a lower margin. And organizations are in the short term very, very much focused on getting the top line growth, and that's all great and dandy, and it's fine when digital represents 20% of your overall number. But when one day you're going to wake up and that's going to be 50% of your total revenue, and you better be setting up yourself for success, making sure that that 50% is profitable and is sustainable. And these are things that we discuss actively with senior leaders so that they can make the right decisions to help drive those outcomes by seeding them today.
Fantastic responses from both of you. Before we let everybody go, though, we'd like to introduce everybody to a new segment that we're bringing into SAP CX Unplugged. Welcome to the CX Final Thought, where we provide our guests 30 seconds to summarize everything they just said in a nice, concise elevator pitch. Angela, I'd like to start with you. What's your final thought?
Well, I think that Riad set up my final thought quite nicely in that it is more than just driving top line. In order to be truly resilient, you have to have a really strong, profitable business. And in order to know that you're doing that successfully, you have to have the right KPIs to measure your profitability. It's not just about measuring revenue. It's about measuring reduction in working capital, improved and reduced cost of sales, and really ensuring that you protect your bottom line.
And that was under 30 seconds. Fantastic. Thank you, Angela. Riad, you need to be under 30 seconds here. What's your final thought?
I don't know if I can keep that promise, but let me try. So my final thought is that, we just came out of a once in a century type of event. And, what the experts are telling us across, different domains of knowledge is that, unfortunately, these type of exceptional events are going to become more and more recurrent and more common. And ultimately, the saying, right? So fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I think it is the impetus of leaders across industries to make sure that they build the foundation for resilient businesses going forward, so that they don't get caught, in the eye of the storm ever again, unprepared.
That's fantastic summary from both of you. Thank you very much. I think it's clear and evident that the way the world has changed, the way B2B organizations are going to market has to drastically change. We need to look at new strategies, and we need to make sure that we're, as always, being customer centric. I think that's what we're really boiling down to at the end of the day, because people have choices. And one thing that I like to say is that I don't really think that there's any brand out there that's so niche that you don't have the choice to go somewhere else. There may be a couple of small spaces like that, but in general, we always have the option of going somewhere else.
Absolutely.
I would like to very deeply thank my guests again today, Riad Hijal from SAP Customer Experience and Angela Troccoli from Mirakl. It's been a fantastic conversation. To our audience, please check out the supporting links that we've provided to you with further information in the comment section that the wonderful Margot Heligman has been pasting for us. She's fantastic, and we cannot execute this show without her. We would also like to let you know that if you have an interesting idea for the show, would like to join us, would like to drive some of the topics, do email us at cxunplugged@sap.com. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and our various social channels, FCEE, sapinsights.com. And we really hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much for joining again, Riad and Angela.
Angela Acosta, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the time.
Thanks, guys.
Always our pleasure.